Good afternoon, everybody. Our speaker today is Hardy. He badly wanted to do his famous imitation of Charlie Chaplin, but I persuaded him to talk about typhoons and other aspects of the weather. So without further ado, here's Harry.
Hello? We're live. Mr. Chairman, and the rest of you lot, not often a Typhoon pilot has a whole bunch of bomber types for a captive audience. I haven't prepared a speech for you fellas today. It's just a little show and tell. What I've done, I've taken my autobiography and made a slide of all the pictures I thought you might be interested in. So we'll show the picture on the screen, and I'll tell you something about it. The Typhoon was the first British fighter that flew 400 miles an hour on the straight and level. It had a 2,200 horsepower motor swinging a 14-foot diameter four-bladed prop, carried 154 gallons of gas, two 1,000-pound bombs, and we had four 20-millimeter cannon. We had 560 rounds of cannon shells, a mixture of high explosive and armor piercing. And cannons fired at 760 rounds a minute. That 2,200 horsepower, by the way, is the same horsepower as BC ferries. That's a fighter squadron organization chart. We had 27 pilots, 31 ground crew, 18 aircraft when we were full up, and a mixture of trucks and jeeps and miscellaneous vehicles. The squadron leader led the squadron, and the flight commanders were flight lieutenants, and each flight commander had 12 pilots, and they ranged from sergeant pilots up to flight lieutenants. This is the takeoff and forming up procedure. We'd line up on the runway in pairs, and we'd take off in pairs. And the red section would go way out and do a slow climbing turn and fly back parallel with the runway. And then the blue section would take off and do a steep climbing turn and form up on us. When we were formed up in our finger four formation, the leader would say, Saffron set, our squadron call sign was Saffron. Saffron setting course over to B. Baker. We'd all switch over to the operational channel from the aerodrome channel, and then we'd head for the target. When we get to the Rhine River, just before we got to the Rhine, the leader would say, Saffron battle formation, and we'd all spread out 100 yards line abreast as we approached the Rhine. And as soon as we start getting the flak on the other side of the Rhine, you guys recognize those little puffs, then the leader would say, Saffron weave gently, and we'd all weave to avoid the radar predicted flak. As soon as we got across the defended area on the east side of the Rhine, we'd reform in our finger four formation. When we were approaching the target, the leader would say, Saffron echelon starboard, and we'd all rack up into our bombing formation in echelon starboard. As he approached the target, when he was in the right position, he would say, Saffron going down now, and then we'd all follow him down as tight as we could in line of stern. Strafing was our most dangerous job. You'd approach the target from a mile or so out, had about a 30-degree dive. We'd pick up to around 350 miles an hour, 400 miles an hour, and then you'd open fire at 400 yards. You could only fire for 1 second. You only get away about 60 rounds, and then you had to pull up over the target. Speed was your only ally when you were strafing. Every German soldier was in range was shooting at you. Now, the Germans put their flak positions in a triangle like this. And we could only get lined up on two of them, as you see, and we'd fire on the first one, and we'd keep firing right through the second one because you couldn't stop in that short a distance. But the third guy would always be firing at you, as you can see there. I landed on the beachhead on August the 10th, at B9. Can't handle the pointer and this at the same time, but you see at the top of the red line there, it's 37 miles from B9 to Falaise, where the battle was going on when I got there. While I was flying my 10 ops on the beachhead, 4 of our pilots were killed, as you can see there by my 2 logbook pages. That's the way we lived on the beachhead. We lived 2 to a tent, and we had canvas cots and canvas wash basins and canvas bathtubs. So that's the way we did it. We know that you guys were all going home to a nice hot bath. Some of you probably had your Batwoman washing your back. Some of the boys having a snack. That was the little truck that used to take us and deliver us to the airplanes. On days off, we went down to Juno Beach. This is Juno Beach you're looking at now in August. There were a lot of motorcycles around. We were all riding motorcycles, but we had so many accidents, they took them away from us. We weren't allowed to ride them anymore. So, that's the dike at Juno Beach. That's the dike that the soldiers climbed up. And we had to dig our own slit trenches. Look at the shovel they gave us, a square mouth shovel. Church parade on Sunday was always out in the open, and we're all sitting on jerry cans there, you can see. And you'll see how the Typhoons are spread out in the background, away up there. There's 4 of them in the picture. And that was to avoid inline strafing. We were spread away out. Another church parade where we're all standing. Now, we were close support to the Army, and as soon as the Army closed the Falaise Gap, they start moving north in a hurry, and we had to move with them. So we were moving from France up to Brussels as soon as the Army had secured the aerodrome there. And 9 of us were going up in this flight that I was in, and we got lost. The leaders got lost. So the last thing we heard was the boss telling us to steer 270 and land when you're running out of gas. So I'm tooling along at 270, and down I see the red panels on the ground down below. The Army put 2 foot by 4 foot red panels in front of them in the most forward position, so we knew it was our guys. So I saw the panels down there, so I knew it was right over the front line. So I kept going to the west, and first thing I had to do was get rid of those bombs. So I picked a great big field full of cows, and I dropped the bombs safe right in the middle of the field. So somewhere in France, there's a couple of unexploded 500-pounders down there in the ground. So anyway, I picked this long field. You can see how long it is because, you know, a Typhoon goes over the fence at 100 miles an hour, stalls at 64. So you can see how far into the field I am already, and look how much field I had left out in front. So I picked a big field, put it down there. And the farmer and his family all came running out to see me. And they were glad to see a Canadian, but they couldn't understand why I couldn't speak French. So that's the family climbing all over. You see there's somebody in the cockpit there. I wonder if those guns were safe. If a kid pushed the button with the cannon fire. So anyway, that night I slept in the daughter's bed minus the daughter. On our way up to Brussels, took us 4 days to hitchhike up to Brussels, and the French were so glad to see, 2 of us went together, so glad to see a couple of Canadians. You can see them all gathering around us there. When we got to Brussels, this Focke-Wulf 190 was sitting there, and it was booby-trapped, and when the boys pulled it down, the souvenir hunters pulled it down, it exploded and killed 2 of them. That's the Pulverizer. Now we're at Eindhoven, and you can see how the boys had to gas us up. Can you imagine the work of the ground crew to gas a Typhoon with jerry cans?